9 Terrible Facts About the First U.S. President George Washington. Washington had only a primary education. The school education of the first president ended at the age of 11, after the death of his father. This deprived young George of the opportunity to get an education abroad, in England. Washington's mother never remarried, forcing the teenager to shoulder a heavy burden at a young age. As the oldest child, she taught him how to run a tobacco farm, and at the age of 16 he got his first job as a surveyor. For the rest of his life, Washington will be embarrassed by the fact that he is not studying well. At the age of 22, Washington led a military skirmish that provoked a war. When France and Great Britain were fighting for territory on the outskirts of the North American colonies, Virginia sided with the British. As an officer in the Virginia militia, Washington was sent to the Ohio Valley, now western Pennsylvania, with 150 soldiers to help repel the French attacks. Warned by local Indian allies that a small French army had set up camp a few miles from his position, he led the attack with 40 of his soldiers and a dozen local warriors. It is unknown who fired the first shot, but at the end of the 15-minute skirmish, at least 10 French soldiers and 1 Virginian were killed, including a French nobleman, Joseph Calonvilliers, Sieur Jumonville, who, as the French later said, was on a diplomatic mission. Joseph's death enraged the French, who called Washington a murderer. The conflict between the French and the British escalated into the French-Indian War, which later became known as the 7 Years' War. Washington's first love was the wife of one of his best friends. "The world should not know about the object of my love," Washington wrote a few weeks before his wedding. The letter was sent to his beloved Sally Fairfax, who was married to one of his best friends and patrons, George Fairfax, the son of one of Virginia's largest landowners. Described as a smart, dark-eyed beauty, Sally became friends with Washington when he was still a teenager. Historians believe that she taught him how to behave in society, communicate among rich and influential people, and even how to dance a minuet. False teeth. Washington loved walnuts, and he usually chewed the shell with his teeth. Therefore, he has almost none left. His dentures were made of various things: teeth torn from the mouths of his slaves, ivory, cow teeth, and lead. Artificial teeth caused him great inconvenience, and were one of the reasons that he rarely smiled. Washington wasn't always a great general, but he was an excellent master of espionage. Washington desperately fought for victory in the Revolutionary War with an army that was constantly undertrained and understaffed. Therefore, in order to defeat one of the most powerful military forces in the world, he increasingly relied on his invisible weapon, a secret intelligence network. Throughout the conflict, Washington's spies helped him make bold decisions that could turn the tide of the conflict, and in some cases even save his life. The Washington spy network was surrounded by various interesting phenomena. There were letters written in invisible ink, a female agent who bore the mysterious nickname Agent 355, an African-American double agent, a tailor who collected dirt by making clothes for British officers. He had no biological children. When Washington married a wealthy young widow, Martha Custis, he became the legal guardian of her 2 younger children, 4-year-old John Custis known as Jackie, and 2-year-old Martha Custis known as Patsy. He loved them very much and was very worried when 17-year-old Patsy died of an epileptic seizure. But there were never any children of their own in Washington. Washington got carried away with animals. Washington was not only America's first president, but also the first breeder of mules. Recognizing the value of the mule to farmers, Washington is considered responsible for creating a mule herd that has served American agriculture in the South for generations. And mules weren't the only animals he bred. In addition to many varieties of birds, Washington kept many breeds of dogs in Mount Vernon, including Dalmatians, English foxhounds, French hounds, greyhounds, mastiffs, Newfoundlands, pointers, spaniels, and terriers. And he gave them very strange nicknames: Taster, Drunkard, and Madame Moose. He had a difficult relationship with slavery. Washington's contradictory attitude to slavery is one of the greatest mysteries of his life and legacy. Like almost all wealthy Virginia landowners, he owned enslaved people. Washington, who was only 11 years old, was bequeathed 10 enslaved people after his father's death. And when he married Martha Custis, who came to him with her own slaves, he bought at least 8 more. During the War of Independence, he became increasingly uncomfortable at the thought of buying and owning other people. Although he supported the abolition of slavery, in practice he did not seek to get rid of slaves. His plantation, wealth and position in society depended on the slave owners. When one of his slaves escaped, Washington spent 3 years trying to get him back. And in his will he wrote that he was freeing all his slaves, but with one condition: they had to stay with his widow and help her. Whether the life of the liberated slaves has somehow changed is unknown. Washington was hard to kill. A tall and sturdy man, Washington has experienced many life-threatening situations. At various times, Washington suffered from diphtheria, tuberculosis, smallpox, malaria, dysentery, sore throat, carbuncle, and pneumonia. He survived by nearly drowning in an icy river. He also survived the shootout, when as many as 4 bullets flew so close to him that they tore his clothes. But in the end, the cold killed him. Technically, it was epiglottitis, an infection of the back of the throat. Washington was afraid of being buried alive. He ordered that his body not be buried for 3 days after his death, just in case. Interesting. Do you want to learn more interesting facts and stories? Then give a thumbs up, leave a comment, share a link on social networks, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.